I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the
of the
United
United
States
States of America and
and
to
to
the
the
republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice
justice for all.
for all.
Thank you, everybody. We'll call the meeting to order. It's 7:02. Can we do a roll call to establish a quorum?
Yes, when I call your school district, please state your name for the record. Afton,
Kenny Edgar's here.
Bayless.
Anna Kohler here.
Thank you. Brentwood. Brentwood. Clayton. Clayton. Ferguson Florison. Kevin M. Martin here.
This meeting is being recorded.
Just threw me off there. Hancock Place.
Here.
Name, please.
Garrett Meese.
Thank you. Hazelwood.
Kevin Langley.
Thank you. Jennings.
Here, Reverend Harold Austin, alternate representing Jennings.
Thank you. Kirkwood. Kirkwood. Ladue.
Keisha Lee.
Thank you. Lindbergh.
Jennifer Miller.
Thank you. Maple Richmond Heights.
Randy Miller.
Thank you. Melville.
Patrick McKelvey.
Thank you. Normandy. Normandy. Parkway. Parkway. I saw Debbie on here. Pattonville.
Amanda Leno.
Thank you. Rittner.
Rob Eaton.
Thank you. Riverview Gardens.
Veronica Morrow Rio.
You. Rockwood.
Lynn Midget, and the alternate is also here, Carrie Bacher.
Thank you. U City. University City. Valley Park.
I'm sorry, Joanne Suda for University City. I couldn't get my mute to work, my unmute.
Thank you. Valley Park. Valley Park. Webster Groves.
Yeah, I'm here, Alex Kahn.
Thank you. I show 16 here, 761,781. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Can we get an approval of the agenda for tonight?
So moved. Patrick McKelvey Melville.
Second, Veronica Morrow Rio Riverview.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right. Next up, can we get the approval of the minutes from our last meeting?
So moved, Afton.
Thank you. Can we have a second?
Second, Hazelwood.
I heard a second from Hazelwood. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right. Next up, we have public speakers. It's a public comment period. Do we have anyone online, Rita?
Nobody signed up.
All right. Moving right along, we have our Parent Advisory Council updates. Let's hear from the PAC.
Dr. Carter, are you on? I don't believe Dr. Carter is logged on.
Okay. We can come back to that, I suppose. Let's table that and come back. Next up, we have superintendent update.
And also real quick, Mr. Martin or Dr. Martin, Debbie Hopper from Pattonville or from Parkway is on.
All right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, I had to get out and come back in.
Glad you made it, Debbie.
Thank you.
Be here.
Yeah, I was here earlier. You just couldn't hear me.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
So Dr. Keenan, strategic plan and comprehensive school improvement plan, third quarter updates.
Yeah, we'll have Dr. Molly Bolton. She's going to update all of you on our CSIP plan and our strategic plan and our progress that we've been making towards it.
Great, thank you, Dr. Keenan. My name is Dr. Molly Bolton. I am the Executive Director of Teaching, Learning, and Accountability, and I'm bringing you our third quarter updates. The reason why I don't have fourth quarter updates is it just ended last week, and so we are in the process of compiling those fourth quarter updates for the end of the year. Next slide, please. So this is our third quarter report, and would just like to give a reminder that, we are at the very beginning stages of our strategic plan and CSIP plan. So this is the first year, third quarter of our 5-year plans. Next slide, please. So this slide you saw last year, and I think previously this year when I gave an update. This is our graphic that explains the difference between a strategic plan, which the strategic plan are the things as you're facing this graphic that you see on the left, and our CSIP or Comprehensive School Improvement Plan, which those would be those items on the right. And so that kind of helps put the distinction between the two. The main distinction is the strategic plan is for the whole comprehensive district, including operations and instructional, where the CSIP plan focuses mostly on the instructional side and the impact it has on students. Next slide, please. So we'll start with our strategic plan progress updates. Next slide. So our first goal is to implement effective systematic data-based systems that will efficiently and equitably support instructions and operations. And so we do have 2 strategies for this goal. And actually the strategy team has combined the 2 strategies into one because they are so interconnected. So you can see developing administrator skills, as well as developing the internal capacity for a data analysis system. Really, this strategy is focused around developing a technology system where we can pull in data from all of our partner districts so that teachers will have all their SSD student data as well as their partner district data in one system. We did a survey of teachers before we started the strategic plan, and some of our teachers are going into up to 12 systems to gather all the information they need for students. So this goal really focuses on how to streamline where our teachers access data. So we do have a couple things going with this plan. We are in a grant with MoreNet, with developing a system using InStructure. And then we also are working on a prototype for that. We are also have a data governance subcommittee that is working on a data governance structure for the district as a whole. And we are developing key performance indicators on a dashboard. So we'll be excited to bring you that hopefully in the fall. So you can see our dashboard of key performance indicators as we will then have a year's worth of data to show on that. So as you can see from this, they are drafting their data governance vision, and they were working on getting feedback from the district leadership team, as well as continuing to work with MoreNet on the prototype. Next slide, please. Our strategic goal number 2 focuses on organizing our resources to support students. And our first strategy under that team, which dealt with gathering all the resources that are used within our different departments, has been completed. And that information was passed on to strategy 2.2, which is then going to take that information and develop database processes to determine how to better and more effectively distribute those pieces. Right now, that's a brand new team. And so they are working on establishing the kind of the scope of their work and what that will entail, and then beginning to integrate some of the data that will be used for that. Next slide, please. Our third goal is working on creating multi-channel communication systems for two-way communications so that we can improve our relationship across all of our stakeholder groups. 3.1 deals with businesses and agencies and those that we partner with to really gain support for some of our student success workings. And so again, this is a brand new team. They are working through their theory of change. And we had some survey data that came in from Panorama from our community partners. And so they're working on reviewing that data and creating an action plan from it. And they're also researching how other organizations, large organizations such as ourselves, track some of those partnerships. And so we can learn from those systems. Our second strategy for this is engaging families. And with this, they deployed the family engagement quality indicators to a few of our partner districts and within some of the SSD schools, and are working on action planning from that checklist data. And then they also are reviewing the Panorama family surveys that went out in January, and will be action planning from that as well. I'd also like to plug in here that Special School District just got a Promising Practices Award for our family indicator checklist from character.org. And so we're very proud of that work that our SSD schools and our FACE department have done. And then we've been expanding that work out into the partner districts. So super excited about being recognized as a promising practice there. Our third and final strategy is establishing a communication systems among departments. And they are working on improving the readership of our Connections newsletter that comes out weekly, as well as developing some field trips for the Learning Center and central office staff into our schools so that our operations staff really get to see our schools in action. As we know, that's the whole reason why we're here, is for our students. So really getting our operational folks out there to visit some of those places. And they're also going to explore doing some video updates with our DLT members. Next slide, please. So I'm going to pause there with the strategic plan and just ask if there's any questions before we move on into our CSIP.
I don't see any.
Thank you. I will move right along to our continuous school improvement plan then. Next slide, please. So goal 1 of our CSIP is to proactively plan for student success. And our first strategy here works with planning for positive post-secondary outcomes. And so this is a team that has been established for quite a few years now, was established under our previous CSIP as well. So they are chugging right along. They got family feedback from our definitions around what a positive post-secondary outcome would be. They are sharing out training tools on our self-determination with our staff. And they're also beginning to gather that post-secondary data and then looking at the different processes that our partner districts use to collect that data and how we can best get that data on our students. Once we have that data, we'll be analyzing that data from our partner districts to see where we might action plan and improve some of those processes. 1.2 focuses on connections between student data and the research impacting, and so we can do some proactive planning. This is a newer strategy, and so they are working on their theory of change and their different action steps, and then really looking at some of the research out there to integrate that into the system that will be created. 1.3 is collaborative planning with partners. and they are in the process of reviewing the existing data that they had collected and then pulling our secondary members. Those are the members who aren't necessarily a part of that core group, but definitely are impacted by this work, pulling them into the planning process, and then be looking at the data from the data review and deciding next steps. Next slide, please. Goal 2 is about coordinating the supports to provide our students with the best education. And so 2.1, again, this is a brand new strategy this year. They're working on developing a shared understanding of programming decisions across the county. This is also a new strategy team. They have developed some tools, one for special education coordinators, and then one specifically for directors, to gather information about the types of programming and the philosophies around those programming across the county. They will then be analyzing that data and deciding next steps from there. And that actually was implemented this spring, and we'll have an update with you for you at our next meeting. 2.2 is ensuring that programming is based on evidence-based practices. And this one, again, has been around for a while. It is one that we continued over from our last CSIP team. Right now, this team is in the process of capturing all the different tools and processes that we have and we utilize within the district, and trying to prioritize some of those schools. Sometimes our teachers are overwhelmed, our staff is overwhelmed by the number of tools we have. So working on streamlining those tools and making sure that our teachers firmly understand and can utilize those tools. We are also working on a prototype of a resource guide for core instructional programs for our partner districts. We got some feedback from many of the curriculum coordinators, assistant SUPs, directors in our partner districts to ask if this would be a good resource for them, and they determined that it would. So we will continue finalizing that prototype for those core programs, and we would be looking in the areas of literacy, numeracy, and social emotional learning. Next slide, please. And our last goal is about really looking at the experience of our highly mobile students and those families, and figuring out ways to support them better. This is a brand new strategy team as well this year. And so right now, they are collaborating with our strategic plan 1.1, which was that data system of where we're sharing data across the district, to kind of coordinate some efforts on some data collection. They are also finalizing the partner district list for who is the appropriate contact person in each district to really gather information about our highly mobile students, and then really refine the data based on getting some feedback from our partner districts about the type of supports and data that we might look at. And then they'll begin building out their prototype for really prioritizing the data that we'd like to look at in order to determine the supports for those students. Next slide, please. And then I'll open it up for any questions on the CSIP or strategic plan, either one.
Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Bolton?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Next up, we have the budget report.
Good evening. So Rita, if you want to pull that up, presentation. Thanks, Mark. All right, so next slide, please. So this budget presentation is really to kind of go over the current budget process, the revenue, the expenditures, and in addition to the historical context and information on SSD, staffing and budgeting over time and going forward. So our 4 core areas have been equity, staff curriculum and supports, and our facilities. So those are the same things that we've had for the last several years. We have put the equity at the very top of that, so that we said this last year that equity would be our primary focus areas to support staff, to support the curriculum, and also to support the facilities. Next slide, please. So as we've done in the past, we've looked at our three areas: the needs, our wants, and our enhancements. Jeff will be talking about this in the overall budget presentation in the next portion of this night. We are continuing to work on supporting our partner districts and our SSD schools. So those are going to be more in terms of what are the needs in those schools and the partner districts by staffing, and also our curriculum needs. We also have our 11 districts that are disproportionate. So 11 out of the 22 have been identified, and that's about $5 million that is allocated equally to the number of students in the districts that have been identified. And then we also have 8 high needs districts. Some of them are disproportionate, and also some of them have not. 2 of them have not been identified as disproportionate, but we've also identified a way to be able to look at our districts that need additional supports, and we've been able to support them differently based on their plans that they are working on within their own districts. Next slide. So here's our tier 2 disproportionality districts. These are the 11 that have been identified. And so we've been working with those districts for the last several years. We are also going to be having a DisPro Summit in the fall of the year to really solidify the plans and really put some actionable items into place, and also some metrics to be able to collect data to show improvement from the DisPro dollars. Next slide. And our tier 3 is our high needs districts. These are the districts that we've looked at with the Distressed Communities Index. They're just the districts that have a higher mobility, higher free reduced lunch, higher additional pieces within their districts, so that we're looking at them differently to support them. And so all the 8 districts we've been working with them. Brittner's our newest district that we've been working with this year to be able to support them based on their data that they have. Next slide. So I'm going to kind of talk about the historical revenue versus expenditures. So when we look at our budget year over year, the SSD board has been really focusing in on how do we support the overall budget in terms of prioritizing the staffing, the equity, the facilities, and then our curriculum. Now, what I want to do is some context here. Now, these are rounded numbers. The exact numbers will be more in the presentation coming next. But this is an example of where our budget sits and where we budgeted and what we actually end up looking at. So in 2021, we had budgeted $480 million in revenue, and our expenditures were not $496 million. Our actual fund balance would have been at that time $318 million if we would have spent the 16 additional million, which would be deficit spending. And so at that point, we would have been at 72.39% for our fund balance. What the actuals turned out to be was $474 million on the revenue, $459 million on the expenditures, $330 million on the fund balance. So you can see the fund balance actually went 11 million to the plus, where we ended 74%. This is what to articulate here is that you can see that there's about a $27 million swing in terms of what we were budgeting in terms of our actuals. Our next one is our budget for 22. So 483 million, 503 million in expenditures. Our fund balance was going to be at 309 based on a deficit spending of 21 million, which would have brought our fund balance to 64.9%. Our actuals for FY22 was 491 million in revenue, 490 in expenditures, 337 million in our actual fund balance. And then we had our actual amount that we added to the fund balance on 22 was the 7 million. The adjusted budget for 22 was going to be 533 million, 524 million. That should be 23 for 23. We actually ended up adjusting our budget for revenue to 533 million. Our expenditures were at 524 million. That was the adjustment made, and then our actual fund balance was going to be 555 million, with our actual amount of $18 million going into our fund balance. So this would be landing us at a 71% fund balance, close to 72%. So going into this next year for our budget of FY23, the revenue is looking at $550 million. Our expenditures are looking at 583 million. These both include our capital pieces in there too. So that's about 20 million out of those, each one of those. Our actual fund balance would be, if we deficit spent, would be 326 million with the actual amount of 33 million, which would bring down the fund balance to 58 million, 58%. And so when we look at all these numbers, we know that there's going to be enough pieces that we can shore up, that we can true up to make sure that we're going to say we aren't going to be deficit spending. We're going to try to we're going to look at the revenue expenditures to be more in alignment. You can see the pattern over the last several years that there's been a 20 million, close to a $30 million swing year over year. So when we look at that 33 million, we know that we're going to continue already look at making adjustments throughout this next year. So next slide, please. So what we looked at this year was our zero-based budgeting and our focus. One thing that I think is fairly important here is that we are down about 1,500 students over the last 3 years. And so when that looks at it, we have to look at how is our staffing and the number of teachers and paraprofessionals that are needed in each school. And so when you look at that's a significant amount, 1,500 students over that short of a period of time is a significant decrease. But you can also see that our increase for our staffing has gone up. So our staffing went up while our support, our student enrollment went down. What that tells us is that we haven't really been looking at what those needs are based on the actual need of the number of staff that are required for each school. And how do we make sure that we're looking at that so that we are understanding this is what is needed in the school versus this is a perceived need. So it's what has happened over the last couple of years is we kept adding more and more staff on top of what we already had. And then we're seeing that the actual decrease in number of students. And you'll see how that affects when we look at the staffing ratios. Next slide, please. So what changed this year? So this year, we're really going to be focusing on our interpreters, our nurses, our hard to fill positions. Most of these positions here, most of the district that SSD supports are hard to fill positions. We need to make sure that we're targeting these positions and that we actually need. What we've noticed over time, and we'll show a little bit more about it, is that we've had vacancies that have been year over year. And in some cases, we've had vacancies that have been vacant for several years. If we have these vacancies open and we are still trying to continue to say we're going to try to fill those positions, even though they might not necessarily be needed because the actual need is what was needed several years ago. And so we want to make sure that we're really focused in on that retention and recruitment so that we say, what are the positions that we actually need so we can fill those positions for those districts. And this is important for those districts that have been hard to fill over the last couple of years. Some of our districts like Normandy have had those historic vacancies. And if we have vacancies sitting in other districts that are not necessarily needed, we're actually taking away the opportunity to hire for those positions because there's a perceived need over in another district. Next slide, please. Here's our staff. We've also been focusing on our staff. There's been conversations around the district here and how do we support our staff and our staff in terms of our teachers, our interpreters, our secretaries, our bus drivers, monitors, and our paras. So our teachers are coming, we settled with our teachers, our SDNEA at 4.9%. This is a 3-year agreement with 1 year on the salary. We still have some work to do on the salary schedule. It's a little wonky, for lack of a better word. And so we're trying to work on how to even that out a little bit more. And how does that make sense for our staff going forward? The interpreters were at 6% and 3% and 3% for 3 years. So you can see that initial bump for the interpreters, that was really intended to make sure that we're competitive, that we are able to hire our interpreters. We have about 64 interpreters throughout the district, throughout the county. And we wanted to make sure that they were that we were able to attract interpreters to come to work for us. And that was to be able to provide that 6% increase for this year. Our secretaries, bus monitors, and facilities, and our overall, our 610, we're finalizing those. We're almost done. We hope to have those done by the June 27th, but we're in still negotiations, discussions with them. And so we moved to our paras. So we really wanted to make sure that our paraprofessionals were being supported. So we moved that salary base from starting at $17.30 to $21. So that's the beginning hourly rate for our paraprofessionals. And I'll go into why at the next slide. So when we looked at our staffing in terms of our paraprofessionals, one of the things that the SSD board has been talking about over the last several years is how do we make sure that our paraprofessionals that are our second largest group of individuals who are supporting our students individually every day. In fact, they're probably the first people that our students see as they come off the bus. Our teachers are out there, but a lot of times our paraprofessionals are the ones that are primarily with them throughout the day. We also know that 75% of our paraprofessionals work 2 to 3 jobs. And so what was happening is our paraprofessionals were saying it's too difficult to work and to stay in these positions in SSD because it doesn't pay enough. And in order to support my family, I have to work 2 to 3 jobs. Some of our paraprofessionals were accessing our SSD food bank to feed their families. And so when we're looking at that, our paraprofessionals actually were below the poverty line that salary was. And so when we look at, are we okay with having that below the salary, the poverty line? And we weren't. And so that's why we were wanting to make sure that we're increasing the amount of the beginning salaries throughout their current salary schedule. The average take-home pay was starting at that $17.30 was about $830. And at the top end of the scale, it was $1,240. The average family, if you had insurance on top of what we provide, SSD provides insurance for every employee that works for us. However, if you want to purchase insurance for your dependent or family, anywhere from $400 for a dependent and $900 for a family. And that would be basically saying if you're a paraprofessional, you could go without an entire paycheck in order to pay for the insurance. We were also competing with Target, Amazon, and QT and Quick Trip. And so when we look at that, some of the physicalness of our jobs it was much more than what they require at Target and Amazon. And we want to make sure that, yes, we're a mission-driven district. Yes, our paraprofessionals are here to support our students because they feel that that is really making a difference. But if we are not able to make sure that we're paying them additional funds or salary over what Target and Amazon, which is less taxing, then that was really becoming a competition for us. Next slide, please. Next. Okay. So going forward, we're going to be really focusing in on our how we're going to be supporting our department budgets and prioritizing our positions in the schools. We do have a new COO, which is our Chief Operations Officer, Deidre Segretti. She is coming to us from Hazelwood. She is going to be, she's continuing right now. She is transitioning into SSD, and she's working with Dr. Hogg, our COO, who's going to be leaving us to go to Melville, which is sad for us to see him leave, but also, to be able to support her on the way in. We're going to continue to work on our SSD board workshops for June and August. We wanted to make sure that we're looking at the budget and forecasting, and we're going to be really looking at those prioritizing of the positions and also prioritizing of the department budgets by truing them up. Because you could see we had a large swing from our, our budgeted to our actual. We want to get that closer. And typically what MSBA says, it should be like 2 to 3%. but we're swinging $40 million either way, deficit spending or increased spending. We're really saying that we have to be able to get that closer so we know what our actual true budget is. And that's what we're really going to be focusing on this year. Next slide, please. So what will be different this year? I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Moore, Chief Moore of Partner Districts. She's going to talk a little bit about how we're looking at our caseloads and specifically how we're also addressing vacancies. Ms. Moore.
Good evening, everyone. The information you have before you is a snapshot of our caseload averages throughout the county. The information to your left demonstrates the average numbers as it relates to countywide, state average, as well as national average. The countywide average at this time is 10, with the state average at 18 and the national average at 22. The information to your right is a breakdown of each individual district, the 22 districts and the one charter school, which is the leadership school that we support as well. When we compare by regions, for example, if we were to look at our North region, some of those districts such as Normandy, Riverview Gardens, Ferguson, Florissant, and Hazelwood, they will line up with any other districts in other parts of the county, such as Afton, Bayless, as well as Parkway school districts. And then we do have quite a few of our smaller districts where you will see that their caseload numbers are extremely small, such as Hancock, Valley Park, and MRH. Some of those are some of our smaller districts that we support. And as we work through this process, we wanted to ensure that we looked at average caseload numbers, specifically in each district, as well as at each building level. Next slide. The information you have before you is a breakdown of student numbers by partner districts. This is just the first group of districts, and we will share more on the slides that will continue. But here you see that breakdown by IEP, the number of students that we service, the number of teachers that are assigned to support in that district, as well as the paras, RBT, as well as our speech and language pathologists. So you see that breakdown and you're able to see how we have been supporting districts throughout the county. And our goal is to ensure that we are working through an equity lens to support all districts with those specific needs. Next slide. Again, you have a breakdown of the next group of districts as well. Next slide. And this is the last slide, I believe. Yes. Next slide. And so as we worked to take a look at each of the caseloads throughout the county, we wanted to ensure that we equalize the staffing ratios. And so the current threshold that we used through this process was to look at a 15-to-1 student staff ratio. And again, this is still below the state and national averages. Resource classrooms are those classrooms where students would periodically come in for support. They would transition to that setting just specifically to receive special education services and then return to the general ed setting. Specifically in those settings, you would see a 15-to-1 ratio. When we're talking about self-contained classrooms, we wanted to ensure that we looked at those models and did not impact service delivery in these areas as well. And so the ratio threshold that we looked at was a 6-to-9 ratio. Next slide. The process that we use to identify positions is here before you. We wanted to ensure that as we reviewed this information, we looked at those pending vacancies. And when I say we, members of our district leadership team, as well as our cabinet, to support with reductions throughout the county, those eliminations throughout the county. And so we looked at retirements, resignations, as well as any current and pending vacancies. There was careful thought and consideration in the areas of auditing those positions based upon student needs, looking at specific school sites, the types of services that we provide, as well as levels when we were determining student needs as well as staff needs. There were multiple data points used, as well as resources. To name a few, they are listed here before you, which includes Power of BI, which is a dashboard that we have established that provides us with day-to-day data in the areas of caseload, staffing ratios, and adult support needs, to name a few. We also wanted to ensure that we looked at individualized supports for students, specialized programming, and master scheduling in schools. Next slide. The process to identify positions, again, in this area, some of the current work that we have begun includes our Caseload and Workload Summit, which started today, and it includes representation from SDNEA, as well as many members of leadership in our district, where we're working side by side to look at caseload averages, to look at weights, and to look at plans for us to establish throughout the county for use in the upcoming school year and beyond. And so that information is in day one, and there are still 2 days remaining for us to finalize some of that work that will be continuous. We want to ensure that we look for opportunities for administration to work with the formula prior to the budgeting process as we move into next year, but also ensuring that administration work to utilize the adult matrix to provide support for students as well. Next slide. When we talk about the focus on retention and recruitment, we're looking at 14 out of 22 districts that had 0 vacant teaching positions and 21 out of 2,718 teaching positions that were vacant in partner districts. And so as you take a look at the information here, this is the information that details the number of vacant positions that were identified in each district. Next slide. The information you have before you now is a breakdown of the number of teachers needed compared to the number of teachers that have been hired at this time for each district. And you'll also see here in the bottom right corner, you will see SLP as well as our PSY, which are our school sites. Next slide. Chief Pendergrass, will you be presenting this information, or would you like for me to continue?
Whatever you'd like, Dr. Moore.
All right, I pass the baton.
So the retention rate, average turnover rate has been 25% for paraprofessionals on a national level. So when we look at the last 4 years, we want to look at the retention rate. What's important for our district is we're able to maintain the paraprofessionals in our district. So as we go down to the 4 years, we've made some significant improvement. We were able to retain, the retention percentage has dropped significantly, which means that our students are able to maintain those relationships that we have with people in the district. Next slide. We also want to look at the teacher turnover rate. And I think we've made a lot of progress with our teacher turnover rate. Of course, those years that we have with the pandemic has made an increase in students leaving, staff leaving for a variety of reasons. But we want to make sure is that we have the right teachers in the right places and that we retain them. Next slide. So as of June 2005, our current positions that we have hired are 80 teachers in the partner districts, 6 speech. We're always looking for social workers Most importantly, we're looking for nurses for our students that need the intensive support from our nurses. And then our paraprofessionals that we still need to fill, which we have hired 130 positions. Next slide. What we want to do, and Mr. Boyd, if you want to support this, we want to look at those recruitment practices for our retention specialists in the districts of Normandy, Ferguson, Florissant, and Hazelwood. Climate is very important. So what we want to make sure is our staff, although that they are hired by special school district, feel like they belong in those districts. Teachers want to be a part of the programming, want to be a part of the districts. They're providing special education services for those students that are in those districts. So what we're looking at this summer at our Principal Institute and other functions is the continued opportunity to strengthen, of course, the partnership with our partner districts, but also when we're looking at the Principal Institute to make sure that they understand that these are students that we support in their districts. Also, our staff support those students in the district and are part of that climate and culture. Next slide.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lindy.
No, go ahead, please, Mr. Boyd.
I was going to add that the other piece of this is that we are going to be and are currently more intentional around looking at this from a retention perspective, doing additional surveying and interviewing people involved in the transfer process, and making sure that we have an understanding of what we need to do to support both the partner district and SSD administration and teams in order to keep people in those districts. If we go back to a prior slide, you'll see that some of our largest vacancies are with some of our partner districts in the north. And so we want to make sure that we are having a deep understanding about why people are transferring out of those districts as well. Next slide. Can we answer any questions?
This is Debbie Hopper, Parkway. I do have a question. That's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead, Debbie.
Go ahead.
Okay. Going back to the staffing ratios, I'd be interested in understanding what is the source for determining what the staffing ratio should be. I understand what the state levels are, but where does that information come from? Is there some sort of best practice that is looked at to determine that these are the appropriate staffing ratios by teacher versus paraprofessional, et cetera?
Wendy, do you want to talk about DESI's framework?
Absolutely. So we had great conversations, Ms. Hopper, about this today. Since shockingly 2003, the district has been looking at working on a formula that represents effectively what special education teachers do, providing services for our students in the districts. So we absolutely have those conversations today to make sure that our reports honor and support all of the incidental activities that happen with our students as teachers go about. So our hopes are the summit that we're doing today that Ms. Moore had talked about earlier. It's our hope that we will be able to implement and actually look at all of the services that our staff provide, look at those variables as you're referring to or asking about, Ms. Hopper, that happens as we provide students the services that are needing, i.e. looking at behavior plans, looking at functional assessments, looking at the variety of related service providers that they have for students. And by the end of this summit, make sure that we have a formula that represents what our teachers are doing in the districts.
Wendy, you also want to talk about what they have with DESI. They also have recommendations in terms of caseloads and class lists.
Correct. So if you go on DESI's website, and we're actually looking at, there are recommendations that DESI provides for student teacher services. With currently what we are as special school district, when we're running some of our reports that we have right now, The average daily caseload, the average daily support, our teachers, for the most part, are experiencing somewhat lower caseloads. However, it is the object of our summit that we make sure that we're able to easily identify and add on those incidental percentages that we have with the district.
Is there consideration taken in, so I appreciate that if caseloads are decreasing, but I also tend to wonder, could it also depend on the severity of the challenges that the students have and the number of students that a paraprofessional or a teacher may have? Because some of these numbers, depending on what type of disability or needs that these students have, because I've seen these paraprofessionals in action, and I mean, they can't be put up on a high enough pedestal, in my opinion. And that, you know, do you look at that in addressing the changing of the staffing ratios based on the severity and the needs and difficulties of the students that they're working with?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Hopper. I'm sorry, Dr. Keenan. That's actually the focus of our work first thing in the morning. Is we are going to be looking at the service delivery model. So we provide a variety of service delivery models, whether it's co-taught teaching, whether it's consultative, whether it's a classroom that supports students with autism. So the team is going to clearly define. Currently, when this work started, we had over 51 different models that the district was looking at. Anybody that knows any type of figuring out caseloads, working with 51 would be kind of overwhelming. So what we wanted to do is narrow that down to 10. We are actually looking at those 10 service delivery models and making sure that encompasses everything for our students that receive consultative minutes, all the way up to our students that would receive essential classroom support.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Jen Miller, Lindbergh. I have a question also. I was curious, when you shared the caseload and class list ratios, were those from last school year?
They're current.
So I guess what my question is like, after you presented that, you showed us how many teachers you were hiring for each district. That's what I'm asking is, are those hires included in those ratios, or are those hires after the ratios? Does that make sense?
Those hires should be included in the ratio.
Okay, because what I'm saying is, so my district had the highest class list and the highest caseload ratios.
Absolutely.
We also had quite a few hires listed. So, but you're telling me then our number is not going down, it's at 15. And we're still the highest in the county. Still, for years. Okay.
Garrett Meese, Hancock Place. Similar question. Since we have historical data on historically underserved communities, is the projection to continually historically underserve these communities, or is there some sort of change that's going to take place to make some corrections in the way you go about stepping up to serving underserved communities within St. Louis County?
So a part of that variable that we are looking at, Mr. Meeks, is the underserved, the poverty. That is some of the percentages that we are looking at. So when we look at the incidental rates over caseload, so when you're dealing with a student that receives a certain amount of goals, receives a certain amount of services, receives a certain amount of case management, what other factors are we missing? And that's what this summit in hopes is going to be able to look at.
This is Sheila Powell Walker, Ferguson Florissant School District.
I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the number that was shared, the loss of students. You mentioned that special school district has lost a little over 1,500 students. And I wondered if you could talk about that. And then the second question kind of ties into what was just said. It looks like there are 8 spots in Ferguson Florissant School District that have not been filled. And what I'm wondering about is, what are the challenges and what is the plan? And I wonder if there is any possibility that special school district might consider some sort of an incentive for people who would, be willing to work in some of those spaces that tend to be harder to fill.
I'll talk a little bit about the numbers, and then Mr. Boyd, I'll talk a little bit about the positions and the recruitment efforts in terms of those districts. And so the 1,500 really looks at, we've seen over the last census, there was a significant number of decline especially in the North County, in overall population. And so when you look at Hazelwood, that was probably the largest group of population, not students, but overall population of decline. And so that it has, when you have less families in one area and they're moving out, or we have less families within any one of the school districts, that's where we're starting to see that decline. So some districts are still saying, staying or growing a little bit. It's not a huge growth in any one of our districts. The other factor here is when we had districts that stayed out longer with the virtual learning, it was harder to retrieve students back. And so the students left in terms of finding those students and where did they go. And so that was another piece of that. And then thirdly, early childhood, when the pandemic happened, parents were less inclined to have students participate in that early childhood, that 4-year-old, that 3-year-old programming. And so therefore, we are starting to see a little bit of an uptick right now in some of our districts where early childhood is coming back. And so they're identifying students. But it was really difficult during that pandemic for families to want to come, first of all, if they came in, if they wanted to have their students come in, and then if they were identified, to go through the the testing, because we still did testing throughout during the pandemic, but parents were less inclined to bring them in. So we saw early childhood. So those 3 factors, with declining population, and then the pandemic pieces in terms of where students returning back, and then the early childhood programming. And we are starting to see some increases back in the early childhood programming. And I'll turn it back over to Mr. Boyd about those districts that we've identified for really making sure that we have staffing in those in those districts.
So currently, our success manager for Ferguson Florissant and North Counties is Tamika Buford, and she has really worked very hard in partnership with our recruitment managers to make sure that we are sourcing viable, sustainable candidates for the district. And so the hiring that you have seen has been because they have really been working hard. They're hustling, and they continue to work hard, continue to try to work with both identifying people who are in current processes of becoming teachers that are our pairs as well, and also making sure that we are expanding where we are going in terms of recruiting people. So we intend to continue to put a lot of effort and energy into that. And also we're looking at different ways in which we will support our North County partners, both in terms of we've contemplated and we've spoken with the board about potential incentive program, but also really the incentive program that would come about would also be part of a training program. So we don't think that you can just put money into the problem. You have to put money in structures and leadership support into the issue as well.
Okay, thank you both for that. I just want to ask, I realize this is probably not something that can be discussed in great detail tonight, but with there being such a large fund balance, I just do wonder
as was said by someone previously, how long are we going to allow there to be these historically unfilled positions? I get that the recruitment efforts are being increased, and I think that's awesome. But how long do we not serve children because we're doing our best, but we're just not able to get people in those spots? It seems like the money's there to offer something additional for those harder to fill spaces. So I just want to ask that that be something that maybe could be taken under advisement.
Thank you, Dr. Powell Walker. Does anyone else have any additional questions?
This is Rob from Rittner. I do.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Eden.
Okay. I'm looking at Rittner's numbers of teachers needed 13, hired 5. Can you tell me, is that 13, is that the tier 2 level, or is that now that we're being moved to a tier 3?
Is actually in all 3 tiers. So they're tier 1 for all the special needs students and hiring the staff. They're identified as disproportionality, and then they've also been identified as that high needs districts, so they're tier 3. So they're actually going to be in all 3 of those, Rob. And then in terms of your district, in terms of the hiring, we're still bringing, like we said, we're still bringing teaching positions to the board. So the board has 2 board meetings in June, and we're still bringing positions. This does not reflect, we have to hire 80 more teaching positions, but this does not reflect the fact that we we've got 2 more board sessions in June, and we are still actively bringing positions forward. So this is just showing and reflecting where our last board was.
Okay. And then probably not something we can talk too much into tonight, but as having some questions around the district, I'm finding that we're losing a lot of our teachers to other districts, more West County districts. What are we doing if those teachers are putting in requests to transfer? And I understand we want to try to meet their needs, but when we have districts in North County that don't have teachers and we're allowing them to transfer to a Rockwood or a Parkway, what are we doing to try to keep some of them in North County?
I think one of the big things, and that's why we're going to be doing the interviews with the transfers. Climate does matter. We did see, not in all districts, but we did see some districts where there was higher amounts of staff. We were pretty close to being fully staffed, and then the staff were transferring out. And preliminary information is that if the staff doesn't feel like they're being supported in the schools, and if they're not feeling that they're welcomed and that they're an equal partner, then they're saying, we're going to go and transfer somewhere else. We have taken out that transfer clause within our last negotiations. So we don't have those 2 transfer fairs that we have in the spring of the year. But teachers will still be able to apply for positions outside of the district. When you are tightening up your positions and we have less positions open, that's going to kind of slow down that option of, people will want to be leaving. But it's really important to make sure that districts are, once we hire, we can keep hiring. In fact, in some of our schools, we've kept hiring teachers year over year but they're leaving because they're not feeling supported. And so it's not in all schools, and that's why we want to target it. But we did see in some cases, a couple of schools where most of their teachers were saying we're transferring out. And so when we look at that, that's important. And we're going to be having conversations with our partner districts to say, with that data that we have, how can we better support the staff that we are hiring in there? Because they're going to have options to go someplace else. And some districts, we have great data that shows teachers don't leave because they want to stay there. They feel very supported. And so I think that's a really important piece to make sure that that is part of this equation is we can hire all the staff we want and have them fully staffed. But if they're not feeling that they're being supported in particular schools, and I think a lot of the superintendents have said, we'd like to know which schools those are. And that would eliminate some of that higher rates in some districts. Not all districts had those higher rates of transfers out. In fact, Rockwood a couple of years ago was one of our highest rates of transfers because it was more of a distance. So now that we're trying to have staff be more aligned with where are they wanting to look regionally, that's been helping, and less people are wanting to leave because of the drive. But we still are seeing where our staff are wanting to leave because they aren't feeling that support. And we're going to continue to work on those pieces.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Lynn from Rockwood. Can I shift gears for just a second? That I think we started out, this was a budget presentation. Is that correct, Dr. Kaden?
It's a budget, but it's also impacted with the positions. Yes.
Sure. So when I don't have it in front of me, but I saw that there's somewhat of a significant in your salaries. And you talked about teachers and paras and related services. Can you talk a little bit about administrators?
In regards to pay?
To salary increases, additional administrators.
We haven't increased the number of administrators. Those are staying the same. But the salary for administrators were equal to the, I think it was like the 4% for administrators.
4.4, okay.
4%, not 4.4, 4%.
4.9, I think that.
4%. Teachers were 4.9.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any additional questions? I don't see any hands. I do see, before we go to our action item, I do see Dr. Carter has joined us. If there's no objections, can we go back to get the PAC update before we move into the action
I'm here.
item? All right, the floor is yours, Dr. Carter. You're on mute.
Okay. Hello. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Mark, can you put up this form because I don't have. First of all, I would like to say, forgive me for my tardiness. I am in the middle of moving. So please forgive me for my tardiness. I would like to bring you greetings as my last farewell as the SSD PAC president. The current SSD PAC President-elect Rebecca Flegg is not able to be with us this evening. So she sends her greetings. She is from the Rockwood School District. Also, we have Denise Bursey, who is the recording secretary, who used to be the correspondence secretary. She has moved up to be the recording secretary. Currently, there is a vacancy between the vice president, the correspondence secretary, and the parliamentarian. We would like to present to you tonight our findings. We have reached out to superintendents in the beginning of this year of the August 2022 to the 23 school year. And in that, we reached out to superintendents because of the partnership agreement. Previous years, 2021 to 2022, showed us that basically we were really looking at the wrong people. SSD has only such a broad spectrum up until a certain point. At that juncture, we have to start looking at where we pay our tax dollars. And we pay our tax dollars to the school districts. Once we realize that our children are children of the district first, and then they become students who receive services as SSD, we as the EC decided to look a little bit further and look at what are some things that are plaguing us as parents, dealing with 4 global issues. Okay, go ahead, Mark. Move it up. That's basically what that says. Go to the next slide. So here are our results. We sent out a survey in March of this year. Some districts did not respond. Other districts, we had to do a second attempt. So here are the school districts that responded. We have Hazelwood, we have Lindbergh, we have the school district of Clayton, Rockwood, Maplewood, Richmond Heights, Kirkwood, Brentwood, SSD. We understand that there were a lot of things going on in March, but we also understand that parents do play an important part in your district. So with that being said, go to the next slide. We know that only 8 districts did respond. So we're looking at the parents who respond. Even though our numbers were low as well, we had 14 parents to respond to represent the following districts: Pattonville, Clayton, Kirkwood, Maplewood, Richmond Heights, Rockwood, Ferguson, Florissant, Leduc, Bayless, Normandy, Parkway, and Special School District. As you can see, we only have 22 partnering. We have 22 partner districts and 1 special school district where we have 5 special schools, 3 CTE schools, and also we have 3 Korean technical school, 5 special schools. So we really have just a few numbers of parents who represent the PAC. And we filled out this in almost double the number of those who filled out as superintendents and board presidents. Next slide, please. So we had 4 global areas of focus. Our first area of focus is parenting voice. Our parent voice, now question 1 and 2 was duplicated by mistake, but you will see that we did put a disclaimer on there so that the data will not be invalid. As I stated at the PEC meeting, I will not walk in the weeds. I will just give you the blatant information that is being presented, which is a stark distinct difference between what superintendents and building superintendent and board members think compared to what parents think. As we look at question 1 states, parents of students of SSD were brought to the table to discuss strategic plans, prepare for bond issues and the like on the district level. Only 8 responses was given by school boards. And as you can see, 50% believe that it's in progress, where 40% believe that they were fully implemented, and only 2% say they haven't even started yet. Next slide, please. As you can see, there is a stark difference in between what parents believe. 75% of parents believe that no progress has been made yet. You guys haven't even started. Where 16% believe, well, we can say 17% rounds up. 17% believes in progress, as well as 8.2 say, hey, you guys are doing a fantastic job. You can go through the next slide, Mark. Okay, this was a duplicate answer on the survey, and you will get the same results. Global focus area number 2, equity and spacing. This has really been a sore spot for parents because school districts would close down a AU classroom or a resource classroom in order to make space for more kindergartners or more first graders, or they need the room because of whatever the case may be, an art teacher or anything like that. So students are placed in their least restrictive environment, 8 responses given. And this is from the district level. 70% believe they fully implemented it, whereas 20% believe that it's in progress, where 10% says, Next slide, please. Same question with the parents. Parents believe 50% is fully implemented, where 25% is in progress, and the other 25% hadn't started. And that question, to your knowledge, was your child placed in this least restrictive environment? Next slide, please. Question 4. Did you ensure classes are being pushed together or eliminated due to spacing? Responses given 8 from the district level. 60% was fully implemented. 30% believed it was in progress, and 10% believed that it was not started yet. As for parents, did we change the slide? Okay, for parents, to your knowledge, was your child pushed together or class eliminated? 14 responses given. which is pretty good on that part. 83% believe that their children were not pushed together, which is kudos to you guys. And then you have 8.3% believe that it was fully implemented, that they were pushed together, that the classes were eliminated. Next slide, please. Excuse me, I'm sorry for the background noise. I just apologize, I'm in a bad spot. Parents want to be heard and discuss opportunities to ensure equity for all students and sustainable learning environments. Okay, districts believe that it's in progress. Some districts believe that it's fully implemented, 20% of the 8 responses given. And then we have 10% that has not started. Next slide, please. Question number 5 for parents. As you can see, that's a totally stark difference. To your knowledge, were you able to be heard and discuss opportunities to ensure equity for all students and sustainable learning environments? As you can see, no parent said that that was fully implemented. As you can see, a lot of parents stated that it was in progress. I can't even pull it up, I'm sorry. It looks like 66.7% believe that it was not started, where the other 33% said it's in progress. Next slide. Our next global focus area was compliance. Thank you. Question 6. Partnership agreement agreed with the intent of complying to the district's responsibility. Okay, so we see that 50% believe that it was fully implemented, 30% believe that it was in progress. And we see that the last percent looks like 30, I can't even add, that's 80. So 20% not started. There we go. As you can see, the parents are totally different. Parents was asked, was it completed with fidelity? The partnership agreement, was it completed with fidelity? As you can see, the 41% said it hadn't even started. 33% stated that it was in progress, and 25% says it was fully implemented as they know. Next slide, please. Question 7, partner districts must show accountability and equity with our children who receive services from, I guess, SSD, from SSD. 8 responses were given. Of those 8 responses, 40% says it was in progress. 44 people answered, 40% said it was fully implemented. And so 20% said that it was not in progress at all. Next slide. As for parents, as you see, it's totally different. As you see, that 41% of the parents said things were not started. 25% of the parents says that it was fully implemented. 33.3% of the parents says that it is in progress. And that's dealing with accountability and equity with students who receive services from SSD. 14 responses given. Next slide, please. Our last focus area is equity and understanding the IEP. Our question 8, principals are more cognizant of building plans and the plans for de-escalation of dysregulated students. 8 responses were given. As you see, it was split between fully implemented and in progress, where 20% said they have not started yet. Keep in mind, we don't know which 20% is, so that when it starts to say not started yet, we don't know if that person or those are the same districts. Next slide, please. As you can see with parents, to your knowledge, do you feel that principals are more cognizant of building plans and the plans for de-escalation of dysregulated students? 14 responses given. As you can see, in progress, 50% of the parents believe that you guys are working towards getting that done. But 41% of the parents said you guys haven't even started yet. So 8.3% of the parents stated that it's fully implemented. Next slide, please. Question 9, in addition to the principal, the general education teacher, the assistant principal, the restorative practice person, bus driver, professional paraprofessional, and security officer all play a major role in the building plans and the plans for the escalation of dysregulated students. As the districts, they said 50% is in progress. That's 30% fully implemented and 20% not started yet. Next slide, please. When asked the parents the exact same question, only adding in addition to the question, as you see that 41% of the parents say it's in progress, 50% say you haven't even started yet, and 8.3% said it's fully implemented. Next slide. Here's the summary of our findings. We understand that there is a stark disconnect between parents and the superintendent's office. But what we have is the middle people, and that's all the assistant principals and everybody in between. Parents are not really being heard on any level of district information or different district level or local at their school, on the district level, even in the superintendent's office. Parents are not being invited. Children are not really being served by the district. They are getting services from SSD, but they are not just SSD children, as we are often told. But that's a SSD problem. No, we are parents of your district who give tax money to your district, who send our children to your district, and we expect our districts to service us as so. So please, as I am leaving and Rebecca Flagg is going to pick up the work, please hear us. Work and plan in this next upcoming school year to make sure that you, as the district, starting with the superintendent, the board, and those who follow succinctly up under them, work towards helping our parents, because our children are not invisible. Our children are living and breathing entities in your school district who just happen to receive services from SSD. Now, will you please help us as parents have our children to be more in your district? Madam President, I will entertain questions at this time.
Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Carter?
Joanne Sudi, U City. Yes, thank you, Dr. Carter, for the presentation. I know it's challenging to have parents fill out so many surveys. I know Special School District is also surveying parents. Have you used any of those, any of that survey data in your work as well?
Please repeat the question. A car was going off. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So I noticed that you had a pretty small number of responses. It's just a challenging thing to get parents to fill out multiple surveys. Special School District also gathers data. Has your team used any of that data in your work?
We had two different distinct focus areas this year. The information that Special School District was garnering was totally different than what we were looking at as parents. Parents are looking at a more focal point, not a global point. We're looking at our individual schools, and looking at those individual schools, we see some glaring problems. And looking at those glaring problems, we then created this survey.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is Debbie Hopper, Parkway. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Debbie. You're fine.
My question is, could there be, I agree with what Ms. Suda just said about the low number of responses from both districts and parents, and I had informed our superintendent and board president to be expecting to receive this when the governing council was informed that this would be taking place.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm disappointed to see that Parkway did not respond as one of the districts, but I see that our parents did. So I'm just wondering if there might be opportunities to redo the surveys again, and maybe at a different time of year, or in cooperation with SSD, some other ways so that you could get more respondents from both the district and the parent side?
I do understand what you're asking. Under this methodology, our intention as the SSD PAC was to, in August, well, in the summertime, try to reach all board superintendents and board presidents and superintendents, and then reach out and talk to each of them. Some of us did have the opportunity to talk to superintendents and board presidents. Others of us did not. And then at that juncture, we tried to reach out between August through December with meeting with those superintendents, those board presidents, giving information, inviting them out to PAC meetings, making sure that we are extending the olive branch. Then in January, that's when we came together as an EC to create questions after dealing with our hot topics, because the SSD PAC meets monthly, and there are some questions and some things that do come up, so that parents have given that information. So once that information was given and compiled, we as the EC then created this survey. After we created the survey, it was now the timeline in March to give that information to the districts and the parents. Understanding that most people are on spring break, we get that. But also knowing that that's how our methodology went. I will let the incoming president know that you guys would like a different timeline, and I'm more than happy to pass that information along. But that's how we ended up at a March survey time. So we'll be able to delineate the information. And keep in mind, we did not go deep. We did not do a quantitative look at trends and what school districts and things of that nature, because we really didn't have a significant amount of data to look at trends. But what we did do was just present the numbers. That's why I said I wasn't going into the weeds with this. So I will let the new president know your wishes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any additional questions for Dr. Carter?
And I apologize again for my tardiness. I'm in the process of moving. As you see, I'm outside. So I truly, truly apologize.
That's okay, Dr. Carter. We thank you for your service to the PAC and to the parents of Special School District.
Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you.
Okay, our next presentation is for Dr. Hogg. It is the 24 budget presentation.
All right, thank you, Dr. Keenan. Good evening, Governing Council. My name is Jeff Hogg, and I'll present the budget this evening. Next slide, please, Mark. And as Dr. Keenan went over earlier, these are the two slides, the four goals for the budget, one being equity, two being staffing, 3 curricular supports, and 4 facilities. Next slide, please. And again, with the zero-based budget, we approach it from a needs, a wants, and an enhancement stance, so that we really look at what the schools and what our partner districts need to drive their budget. I've said it before, we never want to tell the schools, this is your amount. We always want their needs to drive the budget. And then you see the 3 on the right, which Dr. Keenan and the team talked about earlier, the 3 different levels. You have your partner districts, your SSD schools, and then tier 2 disproportionality districts, and then tier 3 high needs funds. Next slide, please, Mark. And so you'll see on the screen in front of you, revenue by source. We have what we had budgeted in FY21, actuals in 21, same as the budget in FY22 and actuals in 22. What we have this year adjusted, and then what we're looking at for next year. So if you look at the bottom line, you'll see that in FY21, we projected $480 million. We received 447, and you can see a little bit lower there in the state or the local and at the state level. FY22, we increased from the budget of 483 to 491. This year, we're projecting an increase of 533. A lot of that is due to an increase in taxes, an increase in investment money, and then some local and transportation as well. So that brings us into next year. Next year is a reassessment year. Generally, we see anywhere between a $10 to $13 million increase in local, which is your assessed valuations, which is real estate and then personal property. So we're showing an increase there. County will remain about the same. We are showing an increase in state. That will be in the transportation area, since that's going to continue to be fully funded and will continue to drive more miles than we did the previous year. Federal will stay about the same, and then contracted, and that's revenue in from our phase 2. So we're looking at revenue right in the area of $550 million for next year. Next slide, please. And then this is the slide Dr. Keenan alluded to earlier. You can see the budgets and the actuals. And so you'll see down in the bottom of budget FY21 and actual FY21, we do project 496 million, brought in 400 or expended 459. Keep in mind that was at the end of COVID. And so that is a big discrepancy there. But then you'll see in FY22, we projected 503 and expended 490. As Dr. Keenan talked about, trying to get those those numbers closer together in that 2 to 3%. It's actually a 2.67 variance in projected and actually spent. So as we look into this year, we're projecting 524. And again, we will probably be a little bit lower than that, but it'll be within that 2 to 3% variance. We're projecting anywhere in the neighborhood of 510 to 512 right now. And then as you look into next year, and that is a much bigger number than this year. So we're looking at 583 million for next. And you can see where those increases are: certified salaries, non-certified salaries. And then we're looking at an increase in benefits of about 5% for our medical. And if you increase salaries, you have to increase your Social Security, your Medicare, and then your retirement as well. So you'll see some increases there. We've reduced purchase services. We knew we had a little bit of variance in that area, so we reduced it a little bit. And then the same with supplies. Capital outlay will remain about the same as we finish up some of our bigger projects, including our central garage. So while that $583 million is a little bit larger, if we do have a 2 to 3% variance, that would put it in the 565 range, and we would still be looking at expending, again, at a deficit rate. Next slide, please. And so as we talked about, we brought 35 positions to the board, either in February or in the last meeting in May. We're approximating about $2.6 million. That does not include benefits of increase to the salaries. And then, as Dr. Keenan talked about, we did reduce 176 staff this year through vacancies and attrition for a reduction of $8.5 million to the budget. Next slide, please. And then that brings me to the end. I know I went through that kind of fast, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions?
I have a question if I can.
Sure.
Dr. Hall, quick question. So I know Dr. Keenan kind of went into this for the previous presentation. What makes us think we're going to actually spend into reserves, as we've not done that over the last several years, but projected to do so? So what makes us think this year will be different in spending into the reserves while also paying 200 positions almost?
Right. So as we reduce, a lot of what we do and when we project will not include, it won't include retirements. And so you'll save money there in your projections. And then next year, as we looked at that 583, we've also included a little bit higher on the negotiations. So we probably won't get to that 583, but even if we do reduce and spend, on that 3 to 4%, we're still looking at $560 million when we're looking to bring in 550 million. So as we continue to expand and get those numbers closer together, we will get into that variance. So as we get that variance closer together, that'll give us more of a chance to deficit spend. And anytime as well that you spend more money, your bottom number in your fund balance becomes higher. And so that reduces your fund balance as well. So even if we don't deficit spend, or even if we don't spend at that 583, we will still reduce that fund balance into the 65% area as we go, Kevin, just because that will increase.
Sheila Powell Walker. Ferguson Flores, and I just had a quick question. So with regard to the 176 staff reductions, I wanted to ask what the decision-making process looked like for deciding where to pull those from.
So those are from historical and vacant positions, but I will defer to Ms. Moore and Ms. Pendergrass. They were the key people making those decisions based on data.
Thank you, Dr. Hoke. I can start off, and Wendy, you can chime in at any time. As we talked earlier in the presentation, Dr. Powell Walker, we looked at many factors of data to make those decisions. We looked at the age of positions. Many of those positions may have an age of 0 and all the way up to 45,000. When we look specifically in partner districts in the North County region, I want to say that number ranged from about 0 to 460 days old for some of those positions. And so that was one piece of data that we looked at. Additionally, we looked at those caseload sizes. We looked at each individual school, but we also looked at the district in total. So if there was the caseload ratio at the district level, also looking at that information at the school level, and then looking at what those data points would be if a reduction would occur, taking into consideration those specialized programs that may be in place in schools throughout the county as well.
So and thank you for sharing that. I guess my reason for asking the question is I'm trying to figure out if positions were pulled from districts that have a great need, but they may have just been pulled because they're hard to fill. So that it sort of looks like we don't have as many positions to fill because we just removed them from those districts, but they may be in districts where the need is there, but since we haven't been able to fill them, we're just going to pull them. So I'm trying to figure out if that factored in here at all.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Ms. Paul Walker. And no, this is based on the need. So when we said that there was decrease in positions, case in point, in some cases, there were 3 students who had adult supports on their IEPs, but there was 4 paraprofessionals. So you don't need that 4th paraprofessional if you only have 3 students with it. We also looked at the caseloads. Some of the caseloads, if you would have, case in point, one of the schools was 91 students, 7 teachers, and that was a 12-to-1 ratio. They had a vacancy, but if they would have had filled that vacancy, those 2 vacancies, they would have had 9 teachers, and they would have brought them down even lower to a 10-to-1 ratio. So they didn't need the 2 additional positions. And so that's what we, Ms. Moore and Dr. Yates and Ms. Pendergrass, they all went through school by school, and to make sure that if there's a need, we're going to make sure we're hiring for that need. And so when the question is, was those positions just automatically pulled? No, we still are hiring 130 paraprofessionals and still hiring 80 teachers on top of what we've already hired so far.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is Carrie Bockert from Rockwood. What is your end goal for your fund balance to be if you're trying to deficit spend? And I'm sorry, I'm new, so I haven't been here from the beginning with this.
Yeah, that's a great question too. So with our end goal, the board is going to be, like I said in my presentation, we're going to be doing some additional workshops. And so the board is going to look at where they want to have that fund balance and how to approach that fund balance adjustment over the next several years. What current policy is 10 to 15%. Most districts across the county are between 20 and 30% fund balance. So our balance we'll be looking at where does the SSD board want to land. Generally, we've had a past practice. It's not the policy, but it's practice of 6 months, which is about 45%.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any additional questions?
Yes, Garrett Meets Hancock Place. So based on your historic 45% window, even though you got a 10 to 15% policy, my question is this: based on your own board's information that I'd like to know your 5-year projection, because my understanding is your deficit spend will bring SSD from 72% current to 19% in 5 years. And that's about a 10.6% deficit spend per year over year, the majority of which is all within the salary schedule. And we all know what that means. It's ongoing expenses, which would then put the district at a 7.3% deficit fund balance in year 6 and upside down in the first semester of year 7. So my question regarding all of that is, how do you plan on stopping this roller coaster? Because even at your recent superintendent meeting, you guys floated the idea in that meeting that your plan, or one of your plans, might actually be increasing the tax levy that will increase the taxes on everybody countywide, and then have a cascade effect through all of our districts having to do the same.
When we presented the other presentation, it was pretty clear that we're saying that our swing is pretty high. So with the overall positions and looking at it, we're going to be truing up the budget. So the significant pieces around that is to making sure that we're aligning where our revenue is worth compared to the expenditures. So the projections, like I showed over the last several years, have been a swing of at least $40 million in some cases, or $27 million in some cases. So therefore, the 33 million, which is not much less than what, not much more than what was projected last year. So which was there wasn't that big of a concern at that point when we discussed this last year. Because we know that we're going to be continuing to look at these pieces around it to make sure that, you know, the 5-year projections, those are projections, and we're going to continue to work through those pieces, as I said, through the budget workshops, and we're going to be truing up the budget a lot more to the actuals, or like what was spent this past year, to aligning it so that it's a little bit more in alignment. So those are the pieces that we're going to continue to work on throughout this. Now, when we talked about it at the superintendent at roundtable, some of the discussions around that, I would just beg to say that one of the things that I heard was in one district, there was 5 different props that were brought forward. So I understand the concern around where we may need to go out for a levy, but we're not even going to be looking and talking about that for the next 5 years. But the other factor here is SSD is here to support students with special needs in your districts. And if we have to go out for a levy in several years, 7, maybe 8 years, I think that's a right for us to be able to do that, because SSD should not be marginalized to say districts get to do this, but we don't. We're the 23rd district part of the county, and I think that we need to be respected in that same matter. So I feel that with the questioning around that is where it was presented is how can SSD go out for that? But when other districts are going out for it, pretty much there was several districts that went out for bond issues this year. There were several districts that went out for levies to pay salaries. And when SSD says that, and they might have to do that later on, then why is that question brought up in terms of that? We're being very thoughtful. We're being very supportive. And what we've heard here, and what I've heard here from the last 4 years, is that SSD has a high fund balance. So we're going to be continuing to work on how to bring down that fund balance in a very thoughtful way, and to be able to make sure that when we do bring it down to the level that we want to have it at, that it's a level that we're going to continue to sustain that.
I will acquiesce that it is high, and I do understand that portion of it. So I can see that aspect of it. So understand it's not 100%. You know, my take away to besmirch the efforts of SSD. But I do know that as the largest district in the state, all of us are actually responsible for the taxpayers' money. And, when it comes to the cascade effect that something of that nature might have on the entirety of the community, on doubling it, because if your levy goes that way, then based on a lot of the things that we do at our districts will then also be affected by the outcomes of all of that. So it's not just a one-sided thing, because whereas we are autonomous, you're like no offense, and I don't mean this in a negative, because again, it's a support thing, but it's like a boat anchor. You go, we all go. So, and that's kind of why it's been a concern. And it just, when you have that large of a deficit spend in that trajectory, when it's all in the salary schedule, it is reminiscent of the reason that our council exists in the first place, because of what took place back in the mid 80s, early 90s, and things of that nature, why the council was formed. And it was because of overspending and problems within the SSD budgeting. So that's the reason we're here, and that's why I'm concerned.
I appreciate that. And we'll continue to work on shoring up our budget so that it is a true budget and where we're at. And so that deficit spending, where we look at it, we're going to make sure that we are very, very conscious of how we make sure that it's not just all in the salaries. That some of those increases were in other areas too, that we can true up.
Are there any additional questions before we take this to a vote? Looks like we have 3 items to approve. The first is approval of the strategic plan and comprehensive school improvement third quarter updates.
Ms.
Is there?
Lee,
Yes.
we still have the partnership agreement.
Oh, I thought we did that. 6.04?
Yes.
Oh, that needs to be approved? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's a presentation.
Oh, I thought we.
Oh, and also I just wanted to let you know that the link that's on board docs is incorrect.
Okay. My apologies.
It links to the budget presentation again instead of the partnership agreement.
Oh. Do we have the correct presentation?
There was 2 budget. There was a budget report, and then there's the FY24 budget, which we just did.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have the partnership agreement, and that's the last presentation.
Oh, okay. I don't know why I had that. I had you done.
Okay.
All right. Ms. Moore, take it away.
All right, I will make this quick. I promise to make it quick but detailed. All right, and so you have before you tonight the partnership agreement updates, and I'll go through this information if you move to the next slide. The purpose of the partnership agreement is to ensure that we increase knowledge and awareness of expectations of the work that we are expected to do in collaboration with each of our partner districts. And we use this tool to monitor and plan in the areas that you see before you. These are many of the areas that are a part of the 7 categories of the partnership agreement. Next slide. Again, these are those 7 categories that I just spoke to that were referenced on the previous slide. And there's also a link in this presentation that will take you to the information for the 23-24 partnership agreement. Next slide. As we worked to revise the upcoming partnership agreement, we did ensure that we focused on the public review committee recommendations to ensure that we implemented and evaluated the outcomes of the partnership agreement using as evidenced by metrics, and ensuring that that information was used and documented and provided for reference of each of our partner districts, as well as SSD boards, leadership, and to move forward with supporting and planning. This information from the partnership agreement is to be discussed and adopted during the partner districts board meeting. And that's at the discretion of each of the partner districts. Many of our partner districts choose to present this information publicly during the board meeting. And there are other ways that a few partner districts also present that information. We ensure that we support each of our partner districts through the use of liaisons. And one of the recommendations was to ensure that our liaisons are able to provide transparent communication outcomes and next steps regarding the work that we do with the partnership agreement and the delivery of special education services. And then we wanted to ensure through those recommendations that we identified joint equity responsibilities of SSD and partner districts. Next slide. As we go through the next few slides, these will be baseline metrics for each of the 7 categories. The metrics for each area is a 0 to 3 scale, 0, 1, 2, and 3, 0 being not implemented at all, 3 being fully implemented. When we look at the strengths and opportunities, anything with a score of 0 and 1, we identified those as opportunities, and anything with a score of 2 and higher are identified as strengths. And so you will see before you what has been identified by looking at baseline data throughout the entire county, populating all 22 partner districts and our 1 charter school information for us to be able to utilize as opportunities to grow and plan effectively for the school years moving forward. And so in the area of staffing, we know that we need to focus on collaborating alternative staffing models and how to identify strategies to increase staff retention, as many have discussed tonight, and how we also ensure that we review our collective bargaining agreements that we have with each of our bargaining units.
I think we have lost you. Can you hear us?
I think Ms. Moore froze.
Yeah, I think our video froze.
Yeah.
So I'll pick up where she's left off here. You want
Okay.
to go to the next slide? All right, so the next one where we were looking at in our category 2, really making sure that we are looking at our teaching, learning, and accountability. When we looked at our analysis, that we really have strengthened the gap analysis in terms of our tiered models. Every one of the districts has one of those, has their tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 aligned on our website. So any district can go there and you can go and see what those tiers look like and what the actual curriculum and professional development, and also the the training that our staff are going through in the gen ed side and in the special ed side. The coordination of professional learning, induction of our new educators, really making sure that we're bringing our new teachers and educators into the system in a supportive way, and providing materials and resources for our new educators and also for the general education supports. Where we saw some opportunities is to really look at our annual professional learning roles and responsibilities on the IAP teams, making sure that we can collaborate that more with our principals, what's the roles of the principals and our leadership teams in our partner districts. So that's what we've been kind of looking at as a new opportunity to kind of continue to expand on. Next slide. Our category 3 was a collaboration of responsibilities and resources. So we have a lot more, a lot more strengths on this one too. We have really strengthened that referral identification and IEP process. I know that we're looking at it across the 22 districts, but making sure that we're having that true understanding with the interventions, that when students are being referred, that it's in a very thoughtful manner. The space allocation, we're continuing to improve upon that. We do have it in some cases where they are being moved, as Dr. Carter had said, but we're really continuing to work with our districts when those things happen. How do we make sure that the space, if there is an adjustment or a change in the space, that we're making sure that we're supporting our students. And also that collective ownership and communication across the department. So our PACs and our FACE and so on, that's really strengthened this a lot this year. The biggest thing for our opportunity is to ensure that the domain categories are considered into our strategic plan. So one of the things that we talked about several years ago when I was at the Ferguson-Florissant board meeting is we talked about that when as school districts are entering into their strategic plans, that they really need to make sure that there's special education is represented in those. And so that in turn, and it's not just living in this partnership, but it's also in the plans going forward. And Dr. Carter talked about this too. It's not only around what that looks like in terms of supporting students in our special school, in your school districts, but also looking at the spacing as you go for bonds and how does that support students with special needs in your planning. Next slide, please.
And I'm back, Dr. Keenan.
Okay, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you. So student services, some of those opportunities that are identified include how we work to design, implement, and improve multi-tiered systems of support. This is where the work begins when individuals begin to refer students who may require special education services. How do we ensure that interventions are in place for students in that particular category of referral, but also how do you establish those supports for students who are just in that general ed setting who may need additional help as well too. Also developing transition plans, not only for from preschool to kindergarten, but how do we ensure that all the way through to post-graduation. We want to ensure that we develop systematic procedures and tools to evaluate those transitions at grade levels, as I just spoke, but also ensuring that we focus on those academic success and positive post-transition and post-secondary outcomes. Next slide. In category 5, this is where we focus on data and technology. In this area, we are working to ensure that we have a joint data dashboard established. This would help us to ensure that we're able to have that reciprocal way of providing data to each other to support the students that we service in each of our partner districts. And how do we ensure that there is equitable access to programs and resources throughout the county, looking to ensure that we meet the needs in the least restrictive environments and those transition planning at all school levels. Next slide. Transportation is an area where not all 22 districts provide transportation of students who have transportation as a related service. And so there are a few districts that do support special school district with providing transportation to our students who require that as a related service, and no opportunities were identified in this area. Next slide. Career and technical education opportunities included really looking to engage and interact with counselors to ensure that those opportunities were there annually for teachers, administration, and key educators to understand the benefits of student participation in post-secondary planning. So how do we ensure that occurs with each partner district? And then to jointly market the programs throughout the region. So staff participating in curriculum planning, as well as promoting those programs. Next slide. Our future work includes focusing on the AC Principal tool. This tool will be closely aligned to the partnership agreement. And this tool is currently in place, but we want to ensure that there are revisions to take place for alignment and for that work to be observed and discussed as we do the partnership agreement. And so we want to ensure that these opportunities that you see before you are a part of that, which it currently has, but how do we also ensure that we get input from all of our stakeholders in our partner districts, looking at our Board of Education's, our directors and coordinators, leadership in our partner districts, as well as our Parent Advisory Council and other stakeholders. We did have the opportunity to engage with our partner district superintendents at the most recent meeting to obtain input from them through survey about what they would like to see in that tool. And we will continue that work throughout the summer. Next slide. These are just some beginning and end of the year important dates to reference as you take a look at this information. This year's partnership agreement, it will end June 30th, and we recommend that this evaluation is discussed with the superintendent upon its completion, but also this is the same information that should be provided to each of our school boards annually to talk about those metrics and the outcomes and the plans moving forward. Next year's partnership agreement should be presented no later than September 29th to each of the partner district boards. And again, that is at the discretion of the partner district superintendent and Board of Education. And those partnership agreements should be submitted to the office. Those signed partnership agreements should be submitted to the office no later than October 31st. At our most recent board meeting, when presenting this information, one of the recommendations we did receive was to ensure that we captured through this process input from our governing council members and to ensure that signatures from those individuals were also captured in our work as we move forward. Next slide. Are there any questions?
This is Debbie Hopper, Parkway. I do have a question. If you can hear me.
Yes.
I know I appreciate your last slide about next steps. My first question is, can we make sure that all the governing council members receive this presentation? Because as Ms. Miller alluded to at the beginning, we did not receive this presentation ahead of time.
Yes.
And then my other question related to the alignment of this with the partnership agreements. Parkway just went through a comprehensive review of its SSD program within its district. And I'm wondering if that's typical of other school districts that are partnering districts that are sitting here this evening, if their districts go through a comprehensive review of that program as well. And then once that program evaluation has been completed, which it took our administration a year to complete their review, has that information been shared with the special school district to see if it is in alignment with its own vision related to CSIP strategic plan and future partnership agreements?
So I can speak in regards to, I can speak on behalf of, I'm assuming, most of the governing council members and partner districts as it relates to program evaluation. There are many districts that do evaluate their programs on an annual basis, and that information is done publicly during a Board of Education meeting. When you asked about the 1 year completion of the review, to my knowledge, I'm not certain if I've received that specifically, but that may be something that Dr. Keenan may be able to speak to.
I had not heard anything about that.
I'd be happy to take that back. It should have been a question that I even asked during our public review of the comprehensive program, if the information would be shared with the special school district. So I will, for Parkway, I will definitely follow up on that.
Thanks, Debbie.
Garrett Meese,
Look-
Hancock Place. Usually when we have a review, it's done by both a staff member of our district and a special school district liaison that usually is presenting that to the board, and it is usually on an annual basis.
Our review had not been done for close to 10 years. This was a comprehensive review. It was not just it's not, our reviews are on cycles when they come to a comprehensive review versus a targeted review versus, specific reason for a review. So this fell under the timeline for comprehensive program review, which are like on a 10-year cycle in Parkway. So that's where this one came about.
Thank you for that clarification.
Are there any additional questions with regards to the partnership agreement?
Yeah, Garrett Meese, Hancock Place again. Just out of curiosity, I know that each district has its individual contract or an agreement. My question is, I know that things happen within each district that there's always I believe the PAC president alluded to it earlier. The students are part of the community, and then they're part of the SSD. But I also know that on some level that there's always a quasi separation between SSD staff and district staff. Even though they all work together as a team, there's some sort of separation at some level. And I know that likely impedes with the ability to act or not act on safety security matters for students, on whether if it's they're reliant on a district staff to be around to alert an issue versus an SSD staff being able to act in lieu of a district staff without complication or implication. And I didn't know if there's anything in our agreements directly related to that could streamline and basically cover liability and all that kind of good stuff. But between if a para needs to act upon something and can't because of an actual staff members of the school is not there, if that's ever been an issue and something that could be resolved through the agreement process.
The agreement is more about how we collaborate, and of course through that there should be some review of policy, but the agreement itself is not one that is detailed to the extent to support with streamlining some of those specific pieces you talked about, but ensuring that those processes are addressed and covered in collaboration, if that makes sense.
Somewhat. I just didn't know if there was any incidents that may require that type of a collaboration where somebody doesn't get themselves up in a trick bag somehow because they went against this because they were trying to act in the best interest of and because they're not staff of the district versus SSD, whether or not there's any liabilities within all that could and it's just more of a I know it's a very technical question, but in this day and age, these types of things are something that we need to be cognizant of when it comes to, well, that's not our staff, they shouldn't have done that or whatever, so I just didn't know from a liability standpoint, how that could be addressed again through an agreement. But again, that's collaboration, but that's above my pay grade too. But at the same time, it's just something my analytical mind goes, well, we probably should address this somehow. That was it.
Thank you, Garrett. Is there any additional questions? I'm not seeing any hands. I think we have had all of the presentations. I didn't skip anybody else. Now we're to our action item, right, Rita? Yes, okay. So first action item is approval of the strategic plan and comprehensive school improvement plan for third quarter updates. Can I get a motion to approve as presented?
So moved, Afton. Kenny
Thank-
Edgar.
Thank you, Afton. Can I have a second?
Second, Melville.
Second, Melville. Sorry, he beat you to it, Debbie.
That's okay.
Do we need to do a roll call, Kevin, or?
I think we can just do regular vote, Rita.
Okay.
can't we?
Sure. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
I heard one opposed. Any abstentions? All right. Motion carries. Next, we have approval of the FY23 budget adjustments.
May I ask a question, Ms. Lee?
Yes, yes.
As we vote, should I, in our district, whenever we have to do a vote, we all have to have our cameras on? Are we abiding with that here, or is it okay that some cameras are off when people are voting?
We have to have our cameras on.
Yes.
Okay.
Can everyone please make sure that if you're a voting member and not the alternate, that your cameras are on? So maybe you should just do the roll call, Kevin, for the next two, especially for the budget.
Rita?
Yes.
Lynn?
Because I came in light with my voice vote, that did not go down as a opposed, right? For the last vote?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
I came in late with my approval for the last vote.
Okay.
And I want to make sure that that wasn't misheard as someone being opposed.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe it was. So
We
did.
it needs
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
corrected.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for the correction, Lynn.
Okay.
Next up, we have approval of the FY23 budget adjustments.
So moved.
Thank you, Kevin, with the first. Can we have a second?
Rob, second.
Thank you, Rob Ridner, for the second. Shall we call it to a vote?
I'm gonna go ahead. When I
Yeah.
call you district, to state your name, just so we have that as well. Afton,
Yes.
Bayless. Bayless. Brentwood. Brentwood. Clayton. Clayton. Ferg Floor, yes. Hancock Place.
No.
Hazelwood.
Yes, Kevin Langley.
Thank you. Jennings.
Yes. Gary Johnson.
Kirkwood. Kirkwood. Ladue.
Yes.
Lindbergh.
Yes.
Thank you. Maple Richmond Heights.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Melville.
Yes, Patrick McKelvey.
Thank you. Normandy. Normandy. Parkway.
Yes.
Thank you. Pattonville.
Yes, Amanda Lino.
Thank you. Rittner.
Yes, Rob Eaton.
Thank you. Riverview Gardens.
Yes, Veronica Marvel Real.
Thank you. Rockwood.
Yes, Lynn Midget.
Thank you. Hold on, my computer's catching up. Hold on. U City, University City.
Joanne Suda, yes.
Thank you. Valley Park. Valley Park. Webster Groves.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 14 yeses, enough to pass with the population as well. Keisha, you're muted, just let you know.
Thank you, sorry. Thank you, Kevin. The last action item in this section is approval of the FY24 budget. Can we have a motion to approve the FY24 budget as presented?
This is Veronica Morrow Real, so moved.
Thank you, Veronica. Do we have a second?
Kenny Edgar Afton.
All right, thank you, Kenny Edgar Afton. We'll call it to a vote.
Thank you. Afton.
Kenny Edgar, yes.
Bayless. Brentwood. Clayton. Ferg Floor, yes. Hancock Place.
Garrett Reese, no.
Hazelwood.
Kevin Langley, yes.
Jennings.
Gary Johnson, yes.
Thank you. Kirkwood. Kirkwood.
Yes. Ben Cappy.
Thank you. Ledoux.
Ben, you need to turn your camera on and when you vote.
Yeah, I'm having trouble. I apologize. I'm trying to figure that out.
Keisha Lee Ledoux, yes.
Thank you. Lindbergh.
Yeah.
Maple Richmond Heights.
Randy Miller, yes.
Thank you. Melville.
Patrick McKelvey, yes.
Normandy. Parkway.
Yes, Debbie Hopper.
Rockwood.
Yes, Linda Dietz.
For my computer running slow, scrolling down. Sorry. Valley Park.
You skipped.
Riverview Gardens, sorry.
Yes. I think you skipped Ridner too.
I'm gonna say you skipped Ridner.
Pattonville.
You skipped Ridner.
And Pattonville.
Pattonville.
Yes. Mandolino.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Ridner.
Rob Eaton, yes.
I'll call Riverview Gardens again just to make sure.
Yes.
Thank you. Rockwood.
Yes, Linda Dietz.
University City.
Joanne Suda, yes.
Valley Park. And Webster Groves.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So now we are up to the board election. I want to read the election process before we present the candidates. And I also want to make a suggestion that we the election process committee be reconvened to update our procedures. It was brought to our attention when we were meeting in person that this was always an in-person meeting, so we may want to reconvene that process. And I also want to make a reminder that according to Missouri State Statute 162.867, the names of all candidates who file shall appear on the ballot, even if they're not in attendance to be interviewed. All candidates will be placed in the waiting room, and candidates will be interviewed one at a time in the order of filing receipt. The remaining candidates will remain in the waiting room until they're interviewed. If there is only one candidate, that candidate will be interviewed. Candidate may make a 3-minute opening statement, and reader will keep time. Questions may be asked by the governing council. Candidate response time will be limited to 2 minutes per question. After each interview is complete, the candidate will be placed back into the waiting room. If a candidate is not present for an interview, they are still voted upon. After all interviews are complete, all candidates will remain in the waiting room during governing council discussion and the voting process is complete. Once a candidate has received a quorum of votes, the candidates will be brought back into the meeting and we will read the results. The voting process. Many districts have both the representative and alternate present. Only the representative can vote, and that's 1 voice per district. The governing council votes publicly by roll call vote. A separate roll call vote will be held for each candidate. Voting will be in the order of filing receipt, and each governing council member gets 1 vote for each candidate and may only vote in the affirmative for 1 candidate per sub-district. A governing council member can vote in the negative for all candidates, even if there is only one candidate for a sub-district. The governing council may not abdicate the election responsibility to the SSD Board of Education. If the selection process does not declare a successful candidate within the first voting session pursuant to the criteria outlined in Section 9, then the governing council will continue to discuss the merits of the candidates and take up to an additional 3 votes if it is believed a candidate may be selected that evening. If after these additional votes are taken and successful candidate is not determined that evening, then the governing council chair will declare an impasse. The governing council will then take sufficient effort to determine other viable candidates in each of the applicable political subdivisions as soon as practicably possible and hold another election at its next regularly scheduled meeting in June, which this is that. To be properly elected, the candidate must receive at least 12 votes and must also receive a majority of the weighted county population as determined by the Census Bureau. 503,139 received in the same voting session. I think we're ready to present the candidates.
I will go ahead and move them to the waiting room.
Okay.
Okay, all 3 are in the waiting room.
Okay. So the first person to file was whom?
Miss Boykin, Miss Stephanie Boykin.
Okay, Miss Stephanie Boykin will be the first candidate that we will hear from tonight.
Here she is.
Thank you. Is she back? I don't see her.
There she is.
Okay. Miss Boykin? I still don't see her. Oh, there you
Yes.
go.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Great.
Good. You have 3 minutes for your opening statement.
Okay. Well, let me begin by saying thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present myself to the board. I really appreciate the opportunity to receive your serious consideration. My desire to serve on the special school district board or governing council is grounded in my lifelong commitment of being of service to the community. And I'd like to utilize my talents and my leadership skills and my capacity to effectively collaborate with others in support of the special school district mission. My experience in education spans about 12 years. I taught in the Columbia Public Schools. Let me back up just a little bit. I'm a product of the St. Louis Public Schools, and I received my bachelor's degree in education and my certification through matriculation at Lincoln University in Jefferson City. And I went right on to to finish my master's degree at the University of Missouri, Columbia. And also received a Master of Education there. And I've had teaching experience in the Columbia Public Schools, in the St. Louis Public Schools, and also in a local charter school. And while at the, in all of those settings, of course, in those general education settings, there were students that required, some special services. And in Columbia, there was a special education teacher in the classroom with me. I also had an opportunity to have, it worked out great because there were also special ed students from the University of Missouri who came and did their student teaching in the main classroom. And so I had quite a bit of interaction as it relates to servicing students along with, or in tandem with special education teachers. As far as my my community service in general. I'm a public service. Most of my public service was through my military service. I served 40 years in the Air Force. 9 of that was active duty. The other 30 years or so was spent in the Missouri Air National Guard. So even though I served two days a month, the other remaining time, that's when I was able to do some other things such as teach and that kind of thing. So the whole citizen airman concept. So when I think in terms of my service on the board, I've served on various boards, over the past 20 plus years. And I just understand the importance of teamwork, the importance of making sure that stakeholders are informed, and to make sure that it's an avenue, or it's a form, or it's a platform that includes mutual respect, effective communication, and collaborative efforts. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for interviewing me today.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your service.
Appreciate it.
Are there questions? Does anyone have any questions? You'll go back to the holding room, and then we'll bring up the next candidate.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
He is back in the waiting room.
All right, thank you. And next up, who is our second candidate?
Miss Carmen Staten.
All right. Hi, Ms. Staten, how are you?
I'm well. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. You have 3 minutes to introduce yourself to us and then tell us about you, and then if there's any questions, we'll follow with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Carmen Staten. It is with enthusiasm and a deep sense of responsibility that I address you, as I firmly believe in the power of education to transform lives and shape the future of our community. I'm running for the SSD school board because I'm passionate about providing our children with the highest quality of education and ensuring that every student has the opportunity to thrive and reach their full potential. Education is the key that unlocks doors of opportunity, and as a member of the school board, I am committed to opening those doors for every student in our district and partner districts. First and foremost, our special education students deserve the utmost attention and care. Every child, regardless of their abilities, has the right to an inclusive and empowering education. As a member of the school board, I'm committed to providing comprehensive support for special education students, their families, and their teachers. This means ensuring that our schools have the necessary resources and specialized staff to meet the unique needs of each student. By fostering an inclusive environment, we can create a sense of belonging and provide every student with the tools they need to succeed. Secondly, teacher retention is a vital component of providing a high-quality education for our children. Our teachers are dedicated professionals who shape the lives of our students and inspire a love of learning. However, we have witnessed talented educators leaving our district due to various challenges. As a member of the school board, I will prioritize teacher well-being by ensuring they have the necessary resources, support, and professional development opportunities to thrive. I will advocate for a fair compensation that recognizes their dedication and creates an environment where teachers feel valued, supported, and inspired to continue their vital work. Lastly, I'm dedicated to responsible fiscal management. I understand the importance of balancing the needs of our students with the financial constraints we face. As a member of the SSD school board, I will advocate for transparency, accountability, and efficiency in allocating resources to maximize educational opportunities while being mindful of the financial impact on our community. In conclusion, I humbly ask for your support and trust as I seek to serve on the Special School District School Board. Together, we can create a learning environment that nurtures the potential of each and every student, prepares them for the challenges of the future, and empowers them to become responsible, compassionate citizens. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to working collaboratively with all stakeholders to ensure success for our students and the prosperity of our community.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Staten? Trying to see if I see any hands.
Garrett Meese, Hancock Place. I heard you say some statements regarding the budget and finances, and obviously we just took a vote on that, and I had concerns about it myself, and I know you've been listening in. So, based on the trajectory of the budget projections, to me it seems to be quite concerning, and just would like to have your insight to how you would approach looking at that on a deeper dive if you were to be elected.
Thank you, Mr. Meese. I will say that I currently have a limited perspective on the fiscal budget at this time. However, I do agree that the budget should align to the district's beliefs and values, and I do plan to hold the district accountable to those things. Resources should be allocated to what we deem valuable.
Fair enough.
Thank
Can
you,
I just
Mr.
chime in?
Meese.
Real quick, is it equitable to ask a question to one candidate that the others are not getting? It doesn't feel that way to me personally. It feels like each candidate should answer the same question.
We can bring back the first and make sure that every candidate answers the same question.
Thank you.
I agree with you, Alex. Thank you. Are there any additional questions for Ms. Staten? I'm not hearing anything, so thank you, Ms. Staten.
Thank you all.
And she's back in the waiting room.
All right, thank you. So we'll bring Mr. Faulkner. We'll ask him the same question, and then we'll bring back the first candidate and ask her the same question. And if there's any additional questions, we'll have to do the same.
And Mr. Faulkner is joining.
Hi, Mr. Faulkner, how are you?
Good afternoon. How is everyone today?
I'm good. How are you? You have 3 minutes to introduce yourself to the governing council, and then there may be questions. So we know we have one.
Okay. I'm Curtis Faulkner, and I currently serve on the board of SSD. I am in my current second term. At the time when I interned, as we've heard tonight, the management of the board of SSD is a very complicated and involved commitment. At the same time, one has to be able to represent the community in which we are elected to do so from, and those challenges that are existing within the framework of those individual communities and districts. Since I have been on the board, as when I first came on, as now, equity is a part of our main focus, which didn't exist when I first arrived. There was no place in the thinking of SSD in reference to pursuing efforts of equity when it came both to our services as well as our employment and individuals talented enough to carry out the tasks that come into play. So today, not only do we have an equity director, but we have an equity department. And some of the individuals who in turn have made presentations this evening are some of the skilled individuals that we have been able to bring into the organization as a way of being able to make the kinds of differences that the focus of equity are to bring about, not only within the structure of SSD, but our services to the community at large. And so, moreover than that, in that particular time that I've served on there, from the standpoint of our vocational schools, I have brought about the addition of a vocation now in production, which is multimedia, cameras, lights, sound. These are now vocational trades that heretofore have not been part of the exposure to my community of North County, but now will be a part of that starting in August at North County Tech, so that our particular children have an opportunity to be exposed to the kinds of union and economic opportunities that are emerging in our society. My particular dedication and the 20 years I have served in the North County community from the standpoint of the Hazelwood School District mostly. I have served from the Budget Committee to the Branding and Public Relations Committee, even to the point to where I am one of 3 individuals that in the hiring of our superintendent has been asked to be a part of the interview process. I have seen 6 different superintendents in my community over the 20-year period. I have also recognized their management styles and what kinds of things that each of them brought or did not bring to the benefit of the district. I believe that these particular experiences that I have had have allowed me to be able to be a part of the consciousness that now emerges through SSD in accomplishing those aspects of equity and bringing about some of the differences that in service that we've heard this evening, and particularly those in, again, my North County community.
That's
So,
time.
okay.
We're at time. There was one question posed. Mr. Meese, you want to repeat your question for Mr. Faulkner?
I will do the best I can to paraphrase it as close as possible. I didn't write it down. So based on the budget presentation this evening and the concerns that I've raised regarding it, what would your focus be on the deep dive on trying to get to a resolution? That's close. So I think that's really close to what I was asking before.
As it pertains to the fund balance information, I think that I and a couple of other board members in our discussion agree that perhaps that there needs to be a policy, first of all, that exists beyond the older policy of 15% that raises our fund balance. Of course, it would be irresponsible of us as a board to be insolvent based upon any activity that brings our fund balance probably below 35 or 40%. In that situation. But, you know, what we are currently facing is that because of the fact that we are an organization who has much is expected, and these transitions that are now at play, particularly after COVID, have brought about psychological challenges as well as challenges in retaining the kind of staffing that is necessary to implement that. And so it's become a challenge that we find ourselves having to take serious look at and to be conscientious about. But I believe that from a budget standpoint, as I said, we are not in an economy at this point in time. Those of us who in turn are trying to pay attention know that there is no way that we can look forward in the next few years, several years, in increasing monies through a tax increase. And as you mentioned in some of the comments that you made earlier, our actions have a way of affecting each of you as individual districts. Again, North County is in a unique position to the point to where we're very limited in reference to what our cash capabilities are. And there's discussion that I've attempted to open up among those board members at other school districts as to how do we go about possibly looking at a better system, unification, and bringing together what few funds that we may have available for us and what limited talent we may be able to access to implement the kinds of activities necessary to educate our kids in North County.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Faulkner. Are there any additional questions? Thank you. You'll be taken back to the waiting room.
Okay.
Mark, is he back?
Yes, he's back in the waiting room.
Okay, can we bring Ms. Boykin back, and then Garrett, can you ask the same question?
Sure.
Thank you.
And she should be with us here in just a second.
All right.
She's here with us.
All right, thank you. Ms. Boykin, there was one question posed, and the other two candidates have asked and been answered. So we want to give you the same opportunity. Mr. Mees, you want to ask the question?
Sure. My question is, based on the presentation of the budget this evening and my concerns that were presented at that time, what would your focus and attention on how to do a deep dive to, I guess, reconcile the concerns I have with this the presentation, because again the current presentation has a trajectory of a pretty negative impact, but I'm gonna stop elaborating because I know I'm getting up into the weeds. Sorry about that. But I think I covered the question because I don't want to go off in too far. So I think I covered it, and I'll let you answer. Thanks.
And may I ask for clarity? So you said the concerns that you voiced, if you could refresh my memory in terms of the concerns that you voiced regarding the budget. If permitted, yeah, I will. So the trajectory is from a 72% fund balance to a 19% fund balance in 5 years. Majority of which is ongoing expenditures that has potential of turning the budget upside down and then forcing a tax levy increase to cover the cost that would affect the entirety of the community. So I'm trying not to clarify too much because I get it.
I didn't ask that specific question to the other candidates. So all right.
Yeah, because I know we covered quite a bit, and we had those two presentations, and so now you've refreshed my memory. I appreciate that. So with the concerns being what they are, number one, I probably would want to just have additional information as to what it would look like, because you expressed, hey, there's no doubt about it, we're going to find ourselves there. But I think it would just help to just have some more clarification. Yeah, we'll find ourselves there, but what is the exact math on that, or what kind of projections we can make relative to that in terms of finding ourselves where we would need to go forward with requesting a tax levy. When Miss, I think it was Miss Keenan, talked about that, she almost talked about it as a necessary, for lack of a better word, evil, that there are times when that just needs to occur. And so just ensuring that we're well informed in the direction that we're going, that we're clear on that we don't, that we're prudent into chasing that down, if you will, and keeping in mind that we're going to find ourselves there and looking at ways that we can work ourselves out of it, where we may not necessarily need to go tax levy, but if we do, ensure that we can present that in a way to the public where asking for a tax levy is always a delicate dance. So if it's something that needs to be done, it's just a matter of being informed, making sure the public can being totally transparent, make sure the public can provide their information regarding it. So while I understand your concern regarding that, it, again, for lack of a better term, maybe that necessary evil, but delving deeper and not putting our head in the sand as to that not being a problem moving forward. There should be a way that we can reach a point where we've done everything we can to
That's right.
mitigate that as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boykin, for your answer. I think that's all the questions. So can all of the candidates be back in the holding room?
And Ms. Boykin is back in the waiting room.
Okay. We're gonna call the candidates to a vote in the order that they were filed. So we'll start with Ms. Boykin. And this is a roll call vote, so you need to make sure that your cameras are on.
Reminder, you vote for one yes total out of the three candidates. Just a reminder, it's not a yes or no per candidate, just if I can make sure I don't mess up. So you only get one yes vote out of the three candidates, correct, Rita and Keisha?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Afton, I'm sorry, this is for
Stephanie Boykin.
Stephanie Boykin, just to be sure.
No.
Bayless, Brentwood, Clayton, Ferguson Florissant, no. Hancock Place,
No.
Hazelwood,
No.
Jennings,
No.
thank you. Kirkwood.
No.
Ledoux. Kirkwood is a yes, just to confirm.
No.
Thank you. Ledoux,
No.
Lindbergh,
No.
Maple Richmond Heights,
No.
Melville, Normandy, Parkway,
No.
thank you. Pattonville,
No.
Rittner,
No.
Riverview Gardens,
No.
Rockwood,
No.
University City,
No.
Valley Park, Webster Groves.
No.
That's 16 no's. 0 yeses. Is that what you have, Rita?
Yes, correct.
That's what I have too. I was
Mhm.
Next up will be voting for Carmen Staten.
Yes. Afton,
Yes.
Bayless, Brentwood, Clayton, Ferguson Florissant, yes. Hancock Place,
No.
Hazelwood,
No.
Jennings,
Yes.
Kirkwood,
No.
Ledoux,
Yes.
Lindbergh,
Yes.
Maple Richmond Heights,
Yes.
Melville, Normandy, Parkway,
Yes.
Pattonville,
Yes.
Rittner,
Yes.
Review Gardens,
Yes.
Rockwood,
Yes.
University City,
Yes.
Valley Park, Webster Groves.
Yes.
I show 13 yeses, 3 nos, enough of the over 503, 139 votes.
Correct.
Did we vote on the third candidate then, or are we done after that?
The third candidate cannot get enough yes votes.
Yes. That is correct.
I still think that we should take the vote just,
I agree.
Let's take the vote for Mr. Faulkner.
Afton,
No.
Bayless, Brentwood, Clayton, Ferguson Florissant, no. Hancock Place,
Yes.
Hazelwood,
Yes.
Jennings,
No.
thank you. Kirkwood,
No.
Ladue,
No.
Lindbergh,
No.
Maple Richmond Heights,
No.
Melville, Normandy, Parkway,
No.
Pattonville,
No.
Rittner,
No.
Review Gardens,
No.
Rockwood, Rockwood,
No, yes.
thank you. No vote. University City,
No.
Valley Park, Webster Groves.
No.
That is 13 no's, 2 yeses.
Yes. So we, according to the vote, then Carmen Staten is the newest board member of special school district.
Correct.
So we want to bring her back.
Should we bring all of them back?
I think you should bring all of them back.
Okay, we can bring them all back.
Mhm, mhm.
Yes.
They should all be back in.
Is everyone back? Do I see Ms. Boykin? Okay. So the members of the governing council have voted. And we have voted to elect Ms. Carmen Staten as the newest member of the SSD Board of Education. Congratulations, Ms. Staten.
Thank you all for the opportunity.
Yes, and thank you to Mr. Faulkner and for Ms. Boykin for putting your name in the hat, and Mr. Faulkner for your service to the Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you. And congratulations, Ms. Staten.
Thank you. Our next order of business for tonight, and this is a long night, is reorganization of officers. So, I'm sorry. Okay. Yes, it's the reorganization of officers. So this is where we re-elect our chair, vice chair, and secretary. So which one do we want to do first?
Chair is what's listed on the agenda first.
Okay, so do we have any nominations for the chair of the governing council?
I would like to nominate Keisha Lee to be chair of the governing council.
Jennifer Miller Lindbergh, second.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, should we call it to a vote?
Yes.
Do we have to roll call?
No.
No, not a roll call vote.
Okay, not a roll call. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? So thank you. I will stay on as chair of the governing council. I appreciate it. Next up is vice chair. I would like to nominate Ms. Veronica Morrow Real to stay as our vice chair.
Patrick McKelvey, Melville, second. Go ahead. You City's good.
Okay, you City with the second. Are there any additional nominees for vice chair? Hearing none, let's call it to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Congratulations, Ms. Morrow Real.
Thank you.
Reign as vice chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have our secretary. Are there any nominations for the position of secretary?
I'd like to nominate Kevin Martin.
Second.
All right. We have a second with Melville. I got you this time. Any additional nominations for the secretary position? Let's call it to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? All right, thank you, Kevin. You get to stay on as our secretary. We will continue on as your officers and hope to serve you proud. Next up is calendar of events, the governing council meeting calendar. Our next meeting, Rita, is in September.
It will be September. Let me pull up the calendar. September 25th, which is a Monday, and it will be governing council orientation. December 4th, Monday, will be the revised budget. Monday, March 4th, will be election of Board of Education members and the preliminary budget goals. June 3rd, also a Monday, approval of budget, approval of CSIP strategic plan, and reorganization of officers.
All right, so make sure you write down those dates, September 25th and December 4th this year, and then in 2024, it'd be March the 4th and June the 3rd.
And I will send the calendar out tomorrow.
Yes. Do we have any announcements?
Yes, I'd like to make an announcement. I was reached out to by the Urban League of St. Louis. As you all know, they hold an event every year down at the America Center. And they wanted me to try to find out who the communications persons were for each school district so that information can be shared with all of our school districts regarding their back to school event. In recent times, they've reached out to basically just the city of St. Louis. And so they want to reach out to all school districts in the event that you have families in need, or just to come and witness the event. They give away all types of school supplies and things like that. I think they have college people on hand and what have you. So I told them that I would share the information with the governing council. So if you would like to send me the name of your communications person, then what I will do is I will forward a list to him with your permission, and they can reach out to your district and send you all the necessary information. So that's it.
Miss Morrow Real.
Yes.
I'm Jennifer Henry. I'm the Executive Director of Communications for SSD.
Okie doke.
I can provide you with a list of all of the St. Louis area communications professionals. Somebody in my department, Miss Chandler, is the director for our professional organization for the St. Louis region. And so she has all of that contact information. So if you forward over the information, I can pass it along.
I most certainly will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any additional announcements? If there are none, I would just like to make one. I just want to say thank you to all of you. You know, at the last meeting, I lost my father. Your prayers, your condolences, even pausing for a moment of silence during that meeting meant everything to me. So I just want to say thank you to you all during this most difficult time for me and my family. If there's nothing else, we are at the last item, and that's adjournment. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you,
Second,
Alex.
Lindbergh.
All right, Jennifer with the second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right, have a great summer, everybody.
You all
Have a great summer.
And
Thank
we
you,
will see you
Keisha.
in September.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.